The problem is that many people have fossilized errors, incorrect uses which are becoming a part of what they write. Here is an example. Probably, lots of people seeing that sentence will detect the error immediately. It should be, "These books are interesting." But this is a common mistake because the words "this" and "these" sound so similar. That's why "this books" sounds right to a lot of people. It's easy to spot the error here because the sentence only contains 4 words and because I told you there is a mistake. But how to find a mistake when it's in the middle of a long essay that you wrote? How can the person who wrote "this books are interesting" spot the error? That's the problem. After all, that person wrote "this books" because they think it is correct. They didn't make the mistake on purpose. After writing an essay of 250 words, you might spend perhaps 2 hours self-correcting it. You should take the view that a lot of what you wrote might be incorrect. So ask yourself about each sentence. Am I sure that is correct? What evidence do I have? If your name is Anna, and you have written the sentence, "My name is Anna," then you can be sure it's correct, because you have seen sentences like "My name is Julie" and "My name is John" in books that you know are written in correct English. If you think hard, you can feel that you have a good reason. It's a very common structure, which you know you know. That is the important point. Use sentences that you know are correct as models for your own writing. If you have any doubts, where can you find such sentences? In the dictionary. If you look up the word "this" in the Cambridge Advanced Learners Dictionary, you will find that the entry makes very clear with explanations and examples that "this" is used before singular nouns and "these" before plural nouns. Indeed, there is even an example which starts like this. "These books are." I've chosen a very simple example here, but the same goes for other words. For example, if you have used a preposition after a verb, is it the right preposition? Prepositions are a notorious source of error. If you have used another verb after a verb, is the second verb in the right form? Should it be the infinitive or the ing form? At first, it seems like a lot of time, and it is, but it's very efficient use of your time because you are checking your English, the English you like to use. You will soon find that you don't need to check so much because you know you know. That is, you're building up a body of English phrases and structures which you can use with confidence. Now, I want to introduce you to a tool that will help you a lot. The British National Corpus. The British National Corpus is a huge online corpus of correct English. A corpus is a large collection of texts which is held on computer and can therefore be accessed electronically. And in the case of the British National Corpus, you can access it online. The British National Corpus contains the texts, but not the pictures or photographs, found in lots of newspapers, periodicals, journals, novels, and non-fiction books, letters, and messages, essays, etc., and the transcripts of lectures, casual everyday conversations, and radio programs. All this language, the novels, newspapers, conversations, etc., was produced in the later part of the 20th century. In total, the corpus contains approximately 100 million words. What can we do with such a corpus? Well, if you go to this link and click Enter to move through into the interface itself, on the left-hand side at the top, under the heading Display, select Quick, or KWIC. under search string, there is a box next to words, and there you can write a word or phrase. Let's say we write depend. We click on search, and then you will see some lines of text appear in the white box in the middle. In the blue total line, it says keyword in context display and has a number. Below this notice are 100 examples of depend in sentences from the corpus. There are 3,425 examples of depend, and 100 of them are shown to you. They are shown to you in context, in the sentences from books and newspapers, for example, which form part of the corpus. Here is an example. One of the uses of depend in the corpus. And on the left, there is this. If you click on this, a page opens, which starts like this. And what this tells you is what the text is and when it was written. And there is also an expanded context below this. It tells you where the sentence comes from. As you can see, it comes from a publication called Computergram International. It is often useful to know where the sentence comes from. If it is from a published book, then you know that it has been carefully written and carefully edited. That's important for us on this course because we want to be sure that we're using good models we can rely on, reliable examples. The British National Corpus contains approximately 100 million words, but 10 million words of that is spoken English. Now, spoken English is not such a good guide to written English. In spoken English, people make mistakes, they change direction in the middle of a sentence, they stop, then they start again. They talk in a way that is okay for talking, but not for writing, where there are different rules. So remember, if you're using the British National Corpus to check if a phrase is correct in writing, you need to find evidence in written texts. We can limit our search to written texts by selecting options in the sections box below search string. In list 1, select fiction, then hold the shift key and select magazine, newspaper, non-acad, academic, and MISC. Now click search again in the box above. This will produce a new set of results beginning with this. Now there are 3,257 instances of depend. This is because we have eliminated the spoken sections of the corpus, so instances of depend in those sections are not counted. But we now know that every example is from written English, not spoken. You will notice that it is also showing a different 100 examples of depend. This will happen every time you search. And don't forget that you can also get examples of depends and depended and depending. And if you want, you can also write a phrase, for instance, depends of. If you do that, you discover that the phrase depends of occurs 10 times in the 100 million words. Here is an example. Earlier in the course, we decided that depends of was wrong, and it was wrong in the sentence we were looking at. But here we see that there are exceptions, and that is very normal. The British National Corpus contains approximately 100 million words. That's a lot of language. There are lots of things that you wouldn't have thought were possible until you see them. For example, if you ask English speakers if you can use of after depend, they will probably say no. Until you say, and what about it depends, of course, on the weather? And they will say, oh yes, I hadn't thought of that. But remember, just because a phrase in your writing also occurs in the British National Corpus doesn't mean that you have used it correctly. Ideally, you need to see the phrase used by 2 or 3 writers in just the way you want to use it. Now here is the task for this module. I want you to look at this sentence. Now there are 2 mistakes in that sentence. You can probably see them immediately, but finding the errors is not the task, or not yet anyway. Now we can divide that sentence into pairs of words. Then he said us he had always worked, worked as, and as waiter. That's 9 pairs. Notice that most of the words form part of 2 pairs. He is the second word in then he, and the first word in he said, for example. You can look up each pair in the British National Corpus and see how often it occurs. For example, the pair then he occurs 5,831 times, and the pair he said occurs 34,434 times. Your task is to find the numbers for all 9 pairs. Which are the 2 lowest numbers? Where are the 2 mistakes in the sentence? As usual, if you have any doubts, then the forum is the place to discuss this.